Hey, everybody, welcome back to another episode of the Growth Capital Podcast. I am your host, Justin Dixon, and today we've got Joe Dalton on the podcast. He is the founder and managing partner at Arsenal Enterprise Capital, which is a lower middle market private equity firm investing in aerospace and defense companies. It's a really interesting episode because we talk a lot about kind of the challenges of investing in businesses that are exclusively working with federal government in the US and how that can be a good thing, but also a little bit of a challenge, especially as you're starting out as a founder. So we talk a lot about kind of his investment thesis around finding businesses that he is going direct to founders, not using the necessary channels of going through brokers and investment bankers, just really leveraging his network to get deal flow. So I think you'll get a lot out of this episode. So let's get Joe on the pod. Interested in hearing conversations with private equity leaders, CEOs of private equity-backed companies, and startup entrepreneurs where they share their stories about their career journeys, starting, investing in, and scaling successful businesses, and the important role that having the right talent plays in building a successful business, then you are in the right place. Welcome back to another episode of the Growth Capital Podcast. Here's your host, Justin Dixon. All right, Joe, welcome to the podcast. Good to see you.
Good to see you too, Justin.
Awesome. Well, let's jump right in. Give everybody that's watching and listening to this a little bit of an overview of who you are, where you are, and what you're up to right now.
Okay, great. So yeah, Joe Dalton, I'm the managing partner and founder of Arsenal Enterprise Capital. We're a lower middle market aerospace and defense focused private equity buyout shop based out in the East Coast. Kind of got that as our primary focus. As I did 20 years in the military, flying fighters, and then working with special operations teams. And then when I retired, I was a co-founder of a defense company, grew that, and then exited it a couple of years ago. And as part of that journey, moved over to the PE side to kind of stay in the space with everything going on in the world. And we focus around specifically kind of technology products within intelligence, reconnaissance, surveillance, those types of systems, and simulation systems.
Got it. So I guess just touch on that a little bit more. So you're only focusing on companies that have a military application, or do you look for companies that have both military and commercial?
There are some commercial dual use types of pieces. I mean, a lot of it is just the ability to make a natural transition into the commercial space or not. A lot, as you know, a lot of defense technology can't do it. But if you look at something like unmanned platforms, autonomous platforms, there's clearly a commercial application that you're seeing within, say, Amazon delivery spaces, as well as on the battlefield of Ukraine. Same things in communications and sensor systems, LiDARs, infrared. GPS, non-GPS navigation, all of those kinds of things apply. So it really kind of allows a good technology that you can either move back and forth between the types of customer bases or expand into different ones. So it gives you that flexibility really to grow the company, because it's really, at least in my opinion, private equity should be about adding value into the businesses.
And you mentioned in the beginning you're doing buyouts, so you're essentially doing majority deals or buying out the 100% of the equity of the founder.
Mm-hmm. Yes, a lot of it is just succession, lack of succession planning by founders. A lot of folks are aging out, not just in the aerospace and defense space, but really across a lot of small businesses in the U.S. where they've either the children aren't interested or they're tired or something. So succession is a big part of it. There's just, life happens in other places. And I think too, and having been in that seat as a CEO and a chairman and all those things too, you kind of reach a natural point where you realize you might be the guy or the gal to take it from 0 to 1, but you're not the one to take it from 1 to 10. And there's a natural, so the smart ones will outsource that to somebody. And the not so smart ones may just, hang on and never really break out. So that's kind of those are the kinds of companies that we target, at least in terms of the profiles and the leadership teams and the founding teams.
Are you typically then transitioning out a founder in that scenario? Like if succession, they want to get out for one reason or another. I've talked to a lot of private equity and some investment bankers that one of the big things they're seeing now, especially like you said, a lot of people are aging out of their businesses. They're getting too old. But they maybe haven't planned appropriately. It sounds like some of the ones that you're talking to have had some type of succession, but they talk a lot about key man risk. And if you're buying a business that's been founder led and that founder leaves, well, not only does institutional knowledge leave, but also all the relationships. They probably, a lot of the companies or clients of those companies are, came in because of that founder, right? And so how do you think about key man risk when you're kind of doing due diligence on a company to understand how big of a risk that is? Because if you're getting a founder out, there's obviously inherently some risk. But talk us through that, because I've had this conversation come up a lot more because of all the baby boomer golden, all the silver tsunami stuff going on in a lot of different businesses. So I'm curious to get your thoughts.
No, it's a pretty tremendous part of it. I think most people in the past gave it short shrift, and now to your point, everything, particularly in the aerospace and defense, and we work pretty much exclusively within the intelligence community, special operations community. That is 100% a relationship driven business area. And so for us, if the founder, typically the founder if they want out, that's one thing. We'll keep them on at a board level and maybe a year or two and kind of slowly degrade. But over time, we'll kind of phase them into more strategic level relationship management, those types of things. Sometimes they want to stay in the business, but they, as strange as it sounds, and I kind of felt that way too, is sometimes they don't want to be the CEO anymore, right? It comes with, it's a pretty substantial burden. And so they might be actually a better fit as, say, a CTO or something along those lines, because maybe they're an engineer and they were passionate about the product and those things. And so it could be a lateral move in that sense, where they can still contribute and drive value, but maintain those relationships. So we do look at the leadership. We also look especially at their executive team underneath them immediately, and then down, and like how much grooming there's been of their own internal talent, how deep are those relationships within those entities. And if it's lacking, then it's a pass. Yeah. So, that becomes our criteria is not a purely financial evaluation. It really looks at the whole business, and the leadership and management as a part of it. And then at the same time, we kind of lean into the networks that we have from, previous experience in the service, previous experience in the industry itself, that, we have subject matter experts that have been in parallel sister types of companies that we can plug into those positions as well. So we have kind of a multifaceted approach to deal with that leadership transition problem.
Got it. And then going back to the lower middle market piece. So how do you, what is lower middle market to you? How do you, what are some of the businesses that you target? And then how are you finding these businesses? Are you doing it all through investment bankers, or are you going direct to founders? How does that work?
I'll answer kind of in two parts. The lower middle market, your kind of classic financial definitions, 5 to 50 million in EBITDA, is kind of the going place. And that has to do with a variety of factors. And so now that changes because, the multiples are different. So in terms of revenue now, it could be anywhere between, say, 30 to 125 million, right? Is kind of in that zone in terms of EBITDA, because the multiples are moving up because there's a lot of money flowing into aerospace and defense. And so we kind of use that as a simple filtering criteria, but then at the same time, we're using the subsectors that I mentioned with aerospace and defense to filter around that. And then when we engage, kind of looking at targets, a lot of what I leverage is my own personal network of former founders, number one. So a lot of proprietary flow. We do have access to some of the, kind of industry organizations and those types of things. And there's some other databases that we can access that most people aren't really aware of. We do use the bankers and the brokers too, as kind of those looking for those one-off. But I found that we're having better success with the proprietary pieces. And that's just a function of really building relationships and trust and speaking founder to founder. It's very hard to do that in a broker-led deal where we don't really have access to the management team up front. It's really hard to get underneath the hood of the company to see what's really happening. And so I think there's a lot more risk there, and it gives us time. And the downside is obviously it's a game of patience when you're working with your own kind of proprietary flow, right? But for the right reasons. But for us, we need to be comfortable with the business first. And then we kind of look at the financials as a secondary item, because it's just a reflection of what's happening, not necessarily a reflection of the true capability of the company, right?
Yeah, because you're obviously trying to buy a business that's got upside, right? If you find a business that's already fully baked, it's like, well, what am I going to do? How am I going to get a return on for my investors and all that?
Right.
And do you raise like a fund, or are you doing more of a syndicate where you're raising deal to deal? What's the structure?
We're doing the deal by deals right now. Okay. We have, our kind of capital provider base kind of runs the gamut of family offices, some institutional investors, various types of debt providers, if it's SBIC, off balance sheet, some commercial bank, different different entities. And what I like that model because it allows us to align the capital with the target in a much cleaner way.
Yeah.
It's a lot more transparent. There's a lot more active engagement to where we're not just, there's no shortage of capital, but getting intelligent capital that's going to add value over not just this deal, but the next, say, 4 or 5. And then particularly as we look to raise, fund 1 and 2 over the next couple of years, that allows us. So it's really building those relationships now and kind of test driving each other, I guess, to see how well we get along before we go down that path. So it's a very thoughtful and intentional strategy that we're trying to execute, but it obviously it becomes a little cumbersome. The challenge with it, we've had to pass some deals where it would be 3 individual companies that collectively put them together would be great. And it's very hard to do that with, individually with different capital providers and those types of things. Whereas in a fund, it would be amazing, right? And it's easy. So that's probably the biggest challenge that I see with it.
Yeah, there's pluses and minuses, right? The access to capital in a funded model is you have the money that's kind of allocated. So if you find a deal on the back of another deal, you're like, okay, well, we've got the ability to do it. Whereas you may have to pass on that deal if it's a syndicated model where it's like, well, we've already deployed capital in this one. Let's get this one running, and then we'll figure out kind of the next one down the road.
Yeah.
And like, obviously there's a ton of capital on the sidelines. Everybody talks about dry powder, in this world because, private equity as a whole, was very, very hot in 2021, 2022. And then obviously interest rates went up and especially the lower middle market and middle market kind of cooled over the last few years. I'm curious to get a sense of what you're seeing. Well, I guess one, a lot of the companies I talk to are very much more commercial focused, not federal or government.
Right.
Or I guess, was the trend the same in your space in companies that are going very heavily or if not exclusively more gov tech or government focused? So that's one, over the last few years. And then two, have you seen that the deal flow kind of start to tick up, in the last, call it 6 to 12 months?
Yeah, the aerospace and defense is kind of an interesting market, right? Because you've got a couple of different factors. And I think normally it would have been able to withstand a little bit of that slowdown. And we have seen a slowdown overall in the lower middle market. Some of the middle market and above has gone up because the strategics are actually much more active than they were in the past. And so you see activity from them in the market. At the same time, you saw with the new administration in DOGE last year, it was a bit of a bloodbath in terms of just, gutting entire, not obviously like USAID is not our area of interest, but it had flow and follow on effects into the rest of the aerospace and defense space because, for example, a friend of mine runs one of the major programs for the Navy and he probably lost 50% of his acquisition personnel. Right. So in theory, that's not a big deal. He still has a budget, but he has effectively $1 billion budget he can't deploy because he has no one to run those acquisitions. Right. And so it does have some knock-on effects. And obviously he has ways to work around it, but it muddies the water and it creates uncertainty. And so a lot of folks that were going to go to market either had to take a knee and pause because their contracts were frozen. Everything is put to stop. And then you get into the shutdown in the fall of last year, and it's kind of created a little bit of a mess within the system. So we saw kind of a pause and then an acceleration, then a pause again, and I think it's starting to free up. And also at the same time, a lot of the companies that were going to market as a result of that were not something that a very sophisticated investor would really look at. They were distressed ultimately. A lot of the ones I looked at, sadly, were the thing that always kind of shocked me was I realized somebody's going to buy that company. Right. I don't know if they know what they're getting, but I would see a lot of red flags that, knowing the industry and knowing, looking at it from an operator perspective, no. And so it's interesting how the money is flowing in, much like venture, right? There's a lot of defense money going into venture. But is it smart money? Is it really being programmed in the right way? Or is it just kind of, chasing the, saturated areas? So, and I think it's a little bit more the latter.
Yeah, I'm curious because a lot of my experience has been with, commercially driven companies where sales cycles can be 3, 6, 12 months.
Right.
But dealing with government, I don't know this for a fact, but I'm guessing the sales cycle is a bit longer and but also can be very multi-year exclusive. And so there's
Right.
inherent risk getting into or building a company that is very focused on the government and selling to the government. But there's also that can be like a moat from other people coming into that
Absolutely.
market. So how do you
Right.
think about that as far as like the pluses and minuses and balancing the scales of, focusing on companies that are exclusively or if not predominantly going into selling into the government when you have things like Doge happen? Like, I mean, nobody saw that coming, I think, prior to it. So yeah, I'm curious to get your sense of the landscape of how that works.
No, you're exactly right, and that's honestly one of the reasons why we focus on. We kind of, when we look at the target market for us, we start with who is their end user customer, and so again, that's why we focus on the intelligence community and the special operations community, because those budgets are generally they're growing on a pretty regular basis. You're not going to touch them. You're not going to cut the NSA or CIA, right?
Yeah.
You can't, especially not in this environment. And
Yeah.
so so you have a little bit of a budgetary protection from the vagaries of the budgetary fights in DC, but at the same because there is a national, despite what people think, there is a bipartisan consensus that our defense is woefully inadequate for the threats that we're facing. The industrial base needs to be rebuilt. You see the money and everything going, not just here, but in across our partner nations. And so you have that element going. And then at the same time, that mode is also reinforced by, again, the relationships, right? These are customers you cannot access unless you come from those communities or you've built the trust. And so for somebody to break into it is very, very difficult. And so that's honestly one of the reasons why, like strategics, when they look to go pick off a company, they're buying a contract or a customer, and because that's the only way into them, right? They can't, the time it takes to grow into it is too long. And so you buy your way in. And so it allows for exit, it kind of sets us up for successful exits, but at the same time, it is a barrier to entry to any kind of new competitor with programs of record, long-term contracts, historically, the 5-year contract, 10-year contract, the renewal rates are, 98%. You really have to mess up to get fired out of the government. But that said, it's a much more challenging environment. I think, the barriers are higher than they were when I launched my companies. You've got cybersecurity requirements, all these different requirements now that are there that were not before. And I would argue it's probably for the best, but it is very difficult to launch something. So from a venture side, it's much more challenging. And again, it kind of, at least the lower middle market is established within that space and can be successful. And to your point earlier, it allows that predictable runway of, hey, this is book business for 5 years.
Yeah.
I've got to recompete. The incumbency capture is, 80, 90%. You look at all those things and you can say, okay, it's a pretty defensible moat, if you will.
Yeah. And I guess if you're a founder or somebody that's wants to start a business that maybe doesn't have maybe they weren't in the military, so they didn't, don't have that kind of check that box on building relationships through that experience, is the only way really to get in is hope and a prayer or working with somebody like yourselves, or are there people that are like, hey, you can buy my influence or buy my relationships and I can become, be part of the cap table, and then I can open doors because you just won't be able to get into them ever, or if not for a very, very, very long time? Is that kind of how that works? If you're
It does, right. There are people that you kind of, and I hate to say it, it's kind of simple team design, right?
Yeah.
And that's not that different from what we did with my firm now. When I looked out at it, said, okay, what do I want my firm to look like? What do I need? I have a certain skill set, but I always, so I looked at the value chain itself and I said, okay, what are the key components of the value chain? Where are my strengths and weaknesses? And I brought people in that address those weaknesses, and we're all complementary, right? So if I was launching another defense business, and that's the way, I'm a caveman Luddite. So, technology is, as I told my professors in business school, I said, hey, get this whole Excel thing. I got it, but it didn't exist when I did my undergrad, right? There was none of it. So I know that I need a techie. I know I need coders. I know, and so there's that, you have to be humble in what you know, and bring in the people and the talent around you. And then it's just a question of really how good's your network? How do you vet them? How do you trust them? All of those things. But I'm helping a company now. He's a friend of mine from, he was Army Ranger, did a bunch of interesting things later, and he has a great idea. We've talked about it for a year. He's they're starting to raise, right? And
Nice.
he's like, I'm an operator. I don't know this stuff. And so he's plugged in with a guy who has that background, and, he's putting together the right team. And so it's good. Right.
Yeah.
So I think you can be successful. It's just you have to be systematic in your approach. Right.
Yeah. And I guess talking about team, I'm curious two things. One, what is the team makeup of Arsenal? Like your business, how big is it? Like, and who are the kind of the key components to, making sure that you have the right people in the right seats and all of that?
So as I said, I kind of broke it down by the value chain, right? So I kind of, on the origination kind of front end of it, my former partner from my old firm is involved. So he was my president, my old company. He and I served in the Navy for 10, 15 years, and we worked together in business for 10 years. So long, deep relationship. He's my saner half, for lack of a better term. So he keeps me grounded. And then I was very fortunate through our acquaintance that we talked about earlier, introduced to my partner Leona, who's she came out of McKinsey, PhD, so value creation. So she's the value creation specialist, right? That's what she does. And then also, finance, get your classic finance guy coming out, has been doing work on the LP side, doing work on the PE side and the buy side, and kind of operator, CFO, cleanup, all of those kinds of things. And then we've got an investor relations, which is, she's got a marketing background, so a little bit different, and from a different industry. So everybody's coming from different industries, which is great because we get different insights, and it's interesting talking to the capital providers because they really like how we've approached the team construct and the different strengths that we've got by phase. And we're not all, no offense to my investment banker friends, but a lot of firms when they start, they're all coming out of the same bank shop.
Yeah.
They all went to the same school. They all think the same. They all act the same. And it's like, okay, I'm not really sure how you're differentiating yourself in the market relative to the capital providers. And I think that we offer that by team design, by sector focus, by domain expertise, and all those things that somehow unconsciously. So if you say, well, what do you do in the company? And I say, I have no idea. I just put together good teams.
Yeah. And that's kind of the secret sauce sometimes is it's not, there's a book called Who Not How that talks all about like not trying to work harder. If you you want to make more money and you want to be more successful, everybody's like, well, how can I do something? It's like, well, no, you need to leverage people,
Right.
figure out who the who is, and it could be a person, it could be a piece of technology or a partnership or whatever. So no, that makes sense. And I'm curious, we're recording this in late March 26. And obviously there's a lot of geopolitical things going on in the world, and you're obviously, plugged in it probably more than most people, just because you invest in it and you have businesses in it. What are founders saying? What are people in your world, thinking about as it relates to not a political side of it, but as it relates to private equity and deals and confidence of buying a business today, and maybe the contract goes away. There's a lot of risk in that. So how do you use that as part of your calculus as you're looking at potential deals to buy?
That is probably the bigger challenge now, because we don't, the uncertainty, say, in the outcome in the Middle East, right? Yeah. Is Iran now going to be a somewhat friendly nation, or is it going to be there forever and completely hostile? And then what does that look like? And now you're in a land of, I need missile defense, I need drone defense, I need all of it, right? And so it's probably introducing too much uncertainty. And so I kind of look at it like, hey, we're just going to kind of look at the major macro trends in combat and in the key elements, and what, since we focus more on a lot of what, kind of the intelligence collection and kind of the find and the fix elements of this piece, and then the analysis of the data, those things are going to be constant. If anything, it's more voracious, because I think the information, it's really a battle of who can get the information, the most accurate information, the fastest, and sifting through, all of the, I don't like to use the word propaganda, but it's really, I don't know, right? You can watch the news, and depending on what point of view they're trying to purvey is what you're going to get. So it's really hard to know what's the ground source of the truth out there. But I think that the major trends that you've seen that started in Ukraine are a key one. So we focus around, it's partly like, hey, what are the capabilities that we know we're going to need in the future, in future combat, but also where are the locations, right? So we know that, whether or not you you like or hate the president, you can make the case that we're effectively neutralizing three of our major, three smaller adversaries between Venezuela, Iran, and Cuba, right? So there's only the list is getting shorter, right? And they're located only in very specific areas, and so that the conflict zones are going to be in that area. What are they going to need to do it? If you're looking at the Pacific, I'd be looking at, and they talk about contested logistics, tyranny at distance. How are you going to supply under fire at distance? All of these types of things. So it's just thinking, it's kind of stepping back and thinking about the bigger picture and letting the dust kind of settle, within it. Again, we don't even know what the outcome of this one's going to be yet. Right. So.
Yeah. And then is there going to be another one and all that stuff? It's just I think that's the general consensus in the private equity. And this extends outside the private equity world. It's like, the uncertainty is causing deals to not get done because it's just, if I buy this business today, is it going to be as valuable tomorrow? And that's why things just aren't getting done.
Yeah. And the way I look at it is, again, I kind of fall back on like simple capabilities. I think the key thing is, I kind of look at it like we're back in it's Cold War III, right? So what are the things that we knew were going on the Cold War in Cold War I and II, I guess. But now, if you look at it in that sense, you're like, okay, cyber war and cyber attacks and defense are a constant. I would argue we've been at war with Iran since the fall of the Shah, right? We've been at war with, pick your enemy. There's been a low grade non-kinetic conflict going on for decades post the fall of the Soviet Union. With multiple actors, right? And whether or not people want to accept that, that's okay. But the reality, so what does that look like? So to me, it's going to be cyber. But then, when you start thinking about defense, it's not just about kinetics and weapons and platforms. It's how do I defend and mitigate attacks on my home infrastructure, or my home, attacks on the energy system, attacks on the financial system, the healthcare, food supply. All of those are viable things that are really at risk. And so it's kind of opening. I think people as a legacy looked at, national security as literally just the military. That's just one part of the bigger puzzle. And so the market, if you think of it that way, is actually much more robust. And there's, so that's why, to me, there's a lot of opportunity, dual use, all of these things. But there's a lot out there, but you've really got to think outside the box to identify it.
Yeah. Well, we got to talk a little bit about AI because everybody talks about AI at this point, so you can't not talk about it. But because you're obviously investing in companies that have much more of a military lean to them. I saw on the news it was like Anthropic, it was deemed a supply chain risk, but they're obviously integrating certain other AI platforms into the government. How do you think about AI as it relates to the business that you're investing in, and also how are you leveraging it, if at all, in your own business to help you do things smarter, faster, et cetera?
Internally, we are using it to accelerate the processes around, capital providers and diligence and target selection and all of those things, and fusing in, it's essentially just fusing in open source intelligence collection. Yeah, that's it, right? And so there's that element for us with that. Within the companies themselves, they're more interesting because, since we're looking at products and tech, there's an integration and automation and AI component to the manufacturing lines. We're trying to be agnostic and ignore the noise of the battles between, is it going to be ChatGPT, is it OpenAI or is it Anthropic or whoever, what's the whimsical side of, supply chains and things like that. But it definitely, and I would say for some of the companies that we look at that are, even though it's a product and say a collection tool, like say it's an intelligence collection product, the AI integration within that to aggregate and synthesize and intelligently, parse that information is really where the key is. And that's where we'll focus more than anything within the kind of companies. Right. So it's kind of into the manufacturing elements. And at the same time, if there is a data collection element to it as part of the sensor systems, then how are we integrating AI into that? And if we can't do that, then let's partner with somebody. And I think that was always my approach when I had my company. Is like, hey, if it's not our domain expertise, we find good partners where that's what they do, and you go and you partner up, you team up. Yeah. It's better than trying to build it yourself, even with all the tools that are there. It's just a faster way to do it. And it kind of de-risks you around, to your point, hey, if I start driving up all my fixed costs and my contracts start getting crushed, right? But at least if it's, it's a network effect of having a broader team, then so be it. So
yeah,
it kind of depends.
this is just a general question, and I don't know the answer to this, so I'm actually hoping you do. Is the Anthropic being deemed a security or supply chain risk? Does that negatively impact companies that let's say a company that you bought uses Anthropic predominantly in their systems, and does that then cause them to be part of the supply chain, and that would be at risk? Does that make sense? Like, I don't know how
that is part of the discussion is,
okay.
And obviously a lot of the lawsuits are designed around that, right?
Yeah.
To say, hey, you can't, the federal government cannot dictate that this is, hey, that's fine. You don't want to do business with this company as a contract at the contract prime level, fine.
Yeah.
But you can't dictate underneath it without some kind of legal. Yeah, it's one thing to say, hey, this product is made in China and I don't want Chinese chips inside of my tech. Okay, that's different. Right. Yeah. But to just pick and choose companies, like, I think that the legal basis of this is pretty clear that the federal government will not win that. They're going to have to fight hard to defend that position, particularly when you can tell it's an emotionally driven. And in all honesty, it's the worst thing you could do. You want all of them, right?
Right.
I want all. I don't want a single system. I don't want a single point of failure underpinning this.
Yeah.
And I understand the dynamic with it. The things that amuse me about the AI companies when it comes to business with doing business with the federal government, and they're like, hey, we don't want our stuff being used as surveillance. It's like the Department of Defense is prohibited by law from surveilling the U.S. They have no authority whatsoever. And so the fact that you're even bringing it up just shows you how ignorant that they are. Yes, it's a real concern. I understand that. However, that's not what they do, right? If you want to look at now, if it was a contract with the FBI, well, I can make you see what I'm saying? So,
yeah.
So fight the right fight. Don't highlight that you're ignorant about certain things. I'm sure your audience is going to be like, "What the hell is he saying?" I'm going to get a lot of things.
I don't know what the bullet points are for Anthropic being or not being a supply chain risk. I just heard it. I saw a clip and I was like, well, you're probably better suited to answer it than I am.
I think if as a business owner, like if I was running my company right now, I'm gonna let the noise, I'm gonna let the dust settle. I'm not going to change what I'm doing. I'm not going to blow with the winds of today. What's happening in DC with the bloviation on all sides. It's like you can't. To your point back about uncertainty, right? People are introducing uncertainty, and so the one thing that I learned being in the federal space for so long is you have to just be able to kind of weather the storms, things pass, and know what is going to be real or not real. The cybersecurity, the CMMC thing that they finally implemented effectively, I think it was last year. They've been talking about that for 10 years. And so we always talk about it at the, even at the board level, hey, we need to implement this. We're like, yeah, do we? Probably not for, not yet. And now everybody's like, oh, now it's, now we're finally like, oh my God, they're actually saying yes. So, right. So you kind of have to take a knee and ignore the noise and let it just kind of play out, at least at the lower supplier level. Right.
Yeah. And I'm curious, obviously we didn't talk a ton about or much about starting your own business. Obviously you founded Arsenal Capital, but I'm curious about how being a founder yourself, obviously being from the military and being a founder, adds kind of weight to if a company is looking at or being courted by multiple private equity groups, how you being also having sat in the founder, in the CEO seat of an operating company, how that helps you kind of, even the playing field or put you even further ahead of your competitors.
I found it gives us a pretty strong advantage. And the reason why is because I understand, and I went through the same thing when we were exiting, right? Yeah. I turned down a lot of offers, and a lot of it it really kind of came down to protecting the team, protecting the customer, protecting the mission. And those are the things that drive founders, right? They're not, yes, you're going to find a founder that they're like, hey, what's the value? And if the number is right, and again, I know we're all for sale in a sense, but in a lot of the people that I work with in this particular space, we are mission driven first. Yeah. And so, when I sold my company, I could have sold it and got a better deal, but I looked at, is what I'm doing and my customer going to suffer? And if the answer was yes, then the answer was no. And I was actually, and one of the reasons why I kind of got into private equity, I was actually a little bit just surprised at how little a lot of the PE buyers at the time understood of the industry that they wanted to get into. And it was actually kind of, they really were like, "Yeah, but your margins are great." I was like, "Yeah, but do you know who my customer is and what that means?"
Right.
So, but to your point, that founder to founder discussion. So I understand what they're going through. I understand the emotion of an exit and what it means and all the things that they're going through. So when I approach these companies on the proprietary side, that is the exact angle that I take.
Yeah.
It's like, "Hey, I've been in your shoes. I know what you're thinking." And you get approached by these guys, you get approached by us all the time, and you're like, "Dear God, leave me alone." And I've heard it repeatedly from founders that they're like, "Why am I taking your call? This guy says I need to talk to you. Tell me why." And when I give them that background, they're like, "Oh, I got it. Okay, let's talk." Right? Because it neutralizes a lot of the challenges, I think, because you're talking about two different worlds. You really are, right? And you got to be on both sides. So I understand it. I had a fairly hard discussion with a founder yesterday, and it was around valuations and all of that, and it did not go well. But I understood how he felt as a founder. But at the same time, as an investor, I was like, "Hey, cash flow, right?"
Yeah. Yeah, you look at it from, you can be in their shoes and see why they're saying what they're saying, but also you need to come at it from, yeah, but I need to make money on this thing. In the long term, it's got to be sustainable versus, you just having this idea or having this business and you want to sell it. I'm curious because I've talked to a lot of people around like the delta between what sellers want to sell their business for and what private equity wants to buy for it. That spread is starting to come down a little bit, which is why we're starting to see some deals kind of fly off the racks. Are you seeing that in your space as well? Like kind of the delta between bid ask is kind of becoming a little bit more narrow?
I am, and I think part of that is I think the sellers are getting more sophisticated. The founders are getting more sophisticated. Before, I've run it like some brokers. I'll get hit up. I'll say, "Hey, I got a great deal for you. Take a look." And I'm like, how did you find this guy?" And he goes, "Well, he's my neighbor." Right. And I'm like, "Okay," because I'll look up the broker and I'll be like, "Hey, you have no experience in this particular lane." And I ask a lot, and I even warn them. I said, "I'm going to ask you a lot of questions, and I know you're not going to have the answers. And now it's an opportunity for us to have a conversation." Okay, fine. Yeah. But to your point, I think they're getting smarter. People understand, like, as a founder, like EBITDA means nothing as an owner operator, right? Why? Because all of my profit is being reinvested in my company to drive growth. That's it, right? There is no, "Hey, here's." So that's why you see a lot more adjusted EBITDA. Number one, right? And number two, we're not designed to run it that way. So you can tell a company is starting to understand it when suddenly you're looking at the P&L and you're doing all the financial analysis and you're seeing EBITDA. You're like, okay, they get it, and they're smart enough to know the multiples are out there, and there's different, there's obviously different ways to do valuation. So I think they're getting smarter about what they're worth, and at the same time, it is narrowing, which is. I think it's better because it simplifies the conversations where there's no confusion, right? So it's actually good.
That's great. I know we've been talking for a while here. I'm curious, we've talked a lot about kind of the past and kind of where we're at kind of present day, I guess. What does the next kind of 12 months for you kind of look like as far as, how many like deals do you try to do? Do you have a deal number you try to do per year? And if so, like, how does that kind of play out as we, round out Q1 in 26 and looking kind of down the next 12 months?
Yeah, we're trying to do about 2 a year.
Okay.
And that's a function of a couple of things. It really is around the ability to fully integrate and affect the integration plans, right? Those 100-day integration plans. We are very hands-on. We're very focused on that. That is the key element of value creation. We've got to get that right. And so our ability to do multiple deals, at least with the size of the team, it's a little bit of a constraint, right? So we're trying to be thoughtful and effective in what we're doing. If we were more hands-off, I would say we could probably do more. But it's really kind of constrained by team size and the desire to really get it right out of the gate. So, 2 a year is kind of it. And then as we look at, we're doing an emerging managers conference coming up here in a few weeks in Dallas. And that's, we're talking with folks about, hey, fund one, maybe 20, 27, 8. But, the fundraising environment is challenging. It's a couple years. It takes X, it takes Y, right? All the GPs are sitting on their assets. And so it's impacting the LPs. And there's all this kind of industry drama around it. So it's not that simple. But at least for now, we're going to kind of keep focused on what we're doing. And even then when we do, at fund level, the intent is, okay, with fund one, now we're looking at maybe, 5 to 6 acquisitions and focus on add-ons, right?
Yep.
And don't spread it. It's just, we want to be effective as much as we can and stay consistent with the thesis. That's the other part of it, right? Is be selective. There are a lot of companies on the market, but they're just not all that great.
Yeah. Yeah. And before we wind this thing down here, I'm curious to dig a little bit into the value creation side, because that term, that job title has sprung up over the last, call it 5-10 years in private equity companies. And so sometimes it's very financial, supported or focused. Other times it's financial and people focused. And how do we, we've identified maybe areas of the business where we need to bring in better talent or add new talent because we don't have that team or department. How do you guys think about it? And I'm sure it's deal to deal, but kind of as a normal kind of operating model, like how do you think about the value creation kind of in that first 100-day sprint post acquisition?
It's a little bit of all of the above. And I say that, and it's interesting having had a defense company and being in that same boat. If I look back at that, I say, ooh, that's ugly, that's ugly, that's ugly. That's actually one of the beauties of the kind of market that we're in is when I left the military, my other friends left government service, we don't know what we're doing. We launch a company, we do our thing, but we aren't into systems processes like you are at a mature business. Yeah. And so some of them build into that great, but there's still a lot of room for improvement. So there's a process piece that's within their systems, all those kind of key elements that you need. People are still running, running stuff on servers and like IT, all of it. There's so much efficiency that you can do there. People's a big one in terms of like training talent, right person, right job, and culture, working on the culture more than anything. The revenue piece is, growth, you kind of touched on it on the growth side is, there's the dual use piece where it makes sense and it's a natural fit. And it's easy to do. A lot of times you can get killed going that direction. But coming out of the industry and knowing, who to partner with, who to team with, what contracts are coming and how to navigate that space, we can, kind of define a roadmap strategically to get to grow the revenue, diversify into different customer sets, different agencies. And, oh, by the way, overseas, because in my opinion, I think the best market is actually over in Europe, in somewhat in Asia, because their industrial base is even worse than ours, right? So you've got the major players there, and that's it. They don't have a big small business, lower middle market ecosystem of defense, like we do. And so there are a lot of companies I work with are doing a lot of business or trying to get more business in those areas. And so we look at it from international growth, a little bit domestic growth, but it's more about focus and tightening things up, and then kind of dual use and commercial. So that's kind of our main three. Not to sell the whole strategy, but
Yeah, no. We'll clip that part out so we don't give away the secret sauce there. But no, I mean I could ask you about 55,000 more questions, both about your private equity business, but also we didn't touch too much on your other business. But I want to be respectful of your time, and so we'll round this thing out here with a 3-pack of questions that I ask every guest. And so, question 1 is what's an influential book or maybe even a podcast that you've found helpful that you'd recommend?
Well, clearly your podcast.
Obviously, of course.
It's funny. I don't read as much as I used to, but I would say if there's one book that I really, it has a lot of application in business and life. And then, the service was I don't know if you've ever read it, The Enchiridion. And I can never pronounce his name. It's either Epictetus or Epictetus, depending how you want to pronounce it. But he's like one of the fathers of Stoicism.
Got it. Yeah.
Studied, under Marcus Aurelius, really interesting story. But so this book is a couple thousand, and it's probably 50, 60 pages. So it's a light read in terms of volume, but it's pretty heavy hitting. But it really gets you focusing on, what matters, what doesn't. It teaches you to let go of the stuff control what you can control and let go of the rest. Right. So I think that's probably my go-to on a daily basis. If, there's a setback or something like that, it's a great thing to fall back on.
Yeah, and it sounds like it could be a good book for something that you read every year, 2-3 years, just to kind of level set. And
it's a good refresher.
Yeah, exactly. Because we all kind of get, we're like, hey, this is great. Then you start driving on a path and you start veering and like, now let me get back on the path there.
Absolutely.
Love it. All right. Second question here. Favorite thing to do outside of work?
I'll separate that. I guess I'm a fitness junkie. I love working out. I get in there, I get at it. It's my time, just my time. And I like to make myself uncomfortable, do different things, push myself to different places. And it's just a way for me to let go. So it's a happy place.
Any specific fitness activity? Is it just going to the gym and throwing weight around, or is there a specific?
I guess it's like a combo hit CrossFit-y, a lot of kettlebells and powerlifting and just crazy, throwing my body all over the place, doing different stuff. So it's always an experiment.
Yeah, well, if it's one of those, if you don't use it, you lose it things.
Yes.
So, and it's harder to maintain and gain the older that we get. So yeah, no, I love it. Makes sense. All right, last question here. Favorite vacation spot?
Well, it's going to be just down from where you're going to move to, Paso Robles.
Okay.
California, if you're familiar.
I'm not.
Sleepy little town, Central Coast area, great wine country, great people. It's old California is the way I describe it. When I grew up, not much has changed, but great people, great food, great wine, and every day is relaxed.
Sounds lovely.
I recommend it for you, Justin.
Yeah, no, I'll definitely have to check that place out because we're looking forward to the move here in a few weeks. But awesome. Well, Joe, if people want to reach out, learn more about you, your business, maybe they need some ins in the military or in the government. How what's the best way to catch you?
Sadly, I'm on LinkedIn like everybody else, so I have no idea what my actual handle is.
That's fine. We'll put everything in the show notes. It'll be good.
But yeah, and people can. I'm sure you have my contact information, but people can call, email, LinkedIn, whatever. But anybody who listens to you, happy to chat with and help them out. All good stuff.
Joe, man, really appreciate you being on the podcast. It's been a lot of fun.
Thank you. I appreciate it, Justin.
I hope you found at least one actionable insight from this episode of the Growth Capital Podcast, your one-stop shop for insights from private equity leaders, CEOs, and startup entrepreneurs on starting, investing in, and scaling successful businesses, as well as the role having the right talent plays in growing a successful business. It would be greatly appreciated if you would rate and review this podcast. And if you're watching on YouTube, please like and subscribe and drop us a comment so we can expand the audience of this podcast. Thank you for all your support, and don't forget about upcoming episodes dropping every Tuesday.